Austin.
And I'm Eddie,
And this is the Austin and Eddie Show.
episode 1. And today we're here to interview our Aunt Charlotte. And there she is. Hey, Charlotte.
Have we started?
Yeah, we started. And
Okay.
well, I wanted to say that Austin and I are playing, but you do this every day. For real life, don't you?
Well, just on the radio. I'm not on TV, now.
Yeah, but you have been on TV, and now you're on the radio. What's the name of your show?
It's called, well, the part that he and I are on is called the Charlotte and JT Show.
Charlotte JT.
And so won't you listen to us, because this is coffee and finesse. In other words, coffee and disaster, really.
What station's that on?
It's WGYJ 93.5 in Yarbrough, Alabama.
Okay, so you just got a plug in on the Austin and Eddie Show, and all of our thousands and thousands of viewers now that we'll recommend that they listen to it, all 2 of them.
Well,
Probably.
I am so.
Isn't that a big deal?
That is a real big deal.
All right. So, Aunt Charlotte, can you tell us something about our family history?
Well, it goes back to my family history really begins. I was born in 1935 on the Midland City Echo Highway in Dale County, Alabama. And my parents were Henry Yarbrough and Evie Phillips Yarbrough. And I was the last of 8 children. They were all away from home when I was born, except my sister, Betty Sue.
Oh.
Now, I had they were married during the time, Earl had been married or was away from home, and he was in the Navy, and Theron, my brother, was in the Army. One was in the Army and one was in the Navy. And Theron,
You talk about Doll.
Dob, we called him Dob, yeah. Dob was sent overseas. That was interesting. Dob was the one that had family and had children. Yet he was the one sent overseas in the Army. And Earl, who was not married, single, the fathers too ever went out of the country, was out of Dale County down to Pensacola, Florida. and we always thought that was pretty interesting. Yeah. And so like I said, Betty Sue was my sister that was left at home with me. And my older sister was named Olita, and she was married and of course left home. In fact, she had a child before Mama had me. And so I have a nephew, of course, that's a year older than I am. How about that? I'm his aunt, and his name was Jerry. Jerry Smith was his name. And of course, Olita was my older sister. And then my next sister was Lois, who was in Washington with the government. And while she was in Washington, of course, she met a guy from Alabama called Hugh Rozelle, who was the nephew of our only Supreme Court justice we've ever had from Alabama, whose name was Hugo Black. And I have a lot of little interesting stories that go along with different people. But anyway, in the meanwhile, they were married, and they came back to Moore, Alabama to live. And that's when Lois, my sister that was in Washington, working for the government, came home, they told me, and made the first potato pie she had ever made the year I was born to help Mama out. And I thought that was an interesting story.
I wonder if it's fit to eat. I reckon anybody could eat it. You know, Mama wasn't famous for being a real big cook.
No. Lois had never really liked to cook. And thank goodness, since I was a baby, I didn't have to eat any of the pie, but we're not commenting on the pie right now. It was the idea she came home to help Mama when the baby was born. So that's the way our family was like, you know.
And that was 1935.
That was 1935.
And that was right in the middle of the Depression.
Right in the middle of the Depression, yes.
Well, let me sidetrack, because you're right at the point that I'm interested in.
Okay.
That we need to get, that we don't know about Grandpa Phillips and Grandma Phillips.
Okay.
You were 8 years old, I think, when Grandma Phillips died, and maybe about 11 or 12
Yeah.
when Grandpa Phillips. Do you remember anything about it?
I do. Like I said, I was small, and the stories I've heard about him, and a lot of it I lived through. Of course, I was older enough to grow up. But Grandpa Phillips, and Matilda was his wife's name, and they lived right up, might say right up the road from us. And Grandpa Phillips was sort of the entrepreneur of our community, you might say, because if anybody could have money back then, I guess he'd be what you consider the wealthiest one, which was very little, that. But he had a lot of farmland back then.
He had the first car, didn't he?
Oh, had the first car. And also, what impressed me, he had the first bell. Back in those days, they would have bells in the community for the farmers to ring, or for him to ring and let the farmers know when to come in for lunch. If they, if they were really going by the clock, their clock was really the sun.
Yeah.
They'd look up when the sun was overhead, and the farmers would come home and have lunch. But Grandpa had a bell that he would ring, and
I wonder what that bell is.
I don't know, but I never shall forget. Grandpa had, of course, a big yard. Back in those days, you didn't have grass; you just kept it swept with what we called back then a brush broom, and they kept the yard so clean and everything. And the bell, when I was a little girl, I'd go up there and I'd see all of that coming into the house. But what was interesting, they had what you called a paisa, and everybody bathed their hands, of course, outside too. You didn't go in the house to wash your hands, because it naturally didn't have bathrooms. But you would have a bucket, you'd have a wash basin, and then you would have beside that a pole with a bucket on it, and in the bucket was a dipper. And so everybody would drink water out of that dipper.
I bet you did.
Well, even as a little girl, I've always been a little curious. I did not like to drink water, and I remember small, I guess I just inherited this from some of my mama probably. I would see the farmers come in, or Grandpa's friends, and of course the women, a lot of them would use snuff, and the men would be, chewing tobacco. And I was real careful. I'd watch the ladies, especially the men, that drank out of the dipper. And so they'd ask me if I was thirsty. I'd say, no, ma'am, or no, sir, I'm not thirsty. Now I'd say no. Because what I did, I waited till they all were gone where they couldn't see me. I'd take the dipper out of the bucket and pour the water in it out till there was no way of rinsing it out. And if I had on a dress big enough, I'd take my dress and wipe off the top of the dipper. And then I'd drink me more water out of it. But I tried to be
Was it a metal dipper or a gourd?
Well, Grandpa and then had a metal dipper. They did have a gourd at one time, I think, but when I came along, they had a metal.
Mama had talked about that gourd.
Yeah, they did. They had gourds out, at one time, and then when I came along, they ranked up to a dipper. But what was so interesting too, I'd look and I'd try to see the side that the ones were having snuff or tobacco on the side of the dipper that they drank out of. And I tried, when nobody was looking, I'd turn the dipper around and get my water, or I'd drink on the same side that they didn't have,
Now,
where they had.
Let me ask you about, we don't know about Grandpa Phillips, his person. Was he kind of like Uncle Pharaoh, laughing and jolly, or was he a little more serious?
He was, I guess he was what you called a gentleman's gentleman too. He was sort of quiet, soft-spoken, and a real picture, like you might say, of a politician today that would be a quiet person. He always held an audience wherever he went, because they were always interested in whatever he had to say, because they knew, like I said, the community did admire him.
He was the head man of the community.
He was. Like I said, I was just fortunate to be, born into his family, you might say. And he was sort of the leader of the community.
But he was a little more serious person.
Oh, very.
What about Grandma Phillips? Now, you don't remember much about her, do you?
No, but I remember she was feisty. She was small.
Maybe that's where Mama got that from.
I think Grandma, you might say, was a lot like my sister Lois. In the if Grandma and Lois were living at the same time, they would get along very well. Or either, I don't know if they could have gotten along, so they're too much alike.
Yeah.
But no.
So she was feisty. You remember any stories about her getting upset with anybody, or?
Well, not right off the bat, but I remember when she got sick, she broke her hip in older days, and she still stayed feisty. And back in those days, they had a bed it was a large room, you know, with a fireplace, and in the back of the room, they had a bed. And that's where I remember Grandma being in that bed a good bit, you know.
That's when she was getting sick.
She was old and had gotten sick,
Yeah.
you know. And then the families would take turns, you know. You didn't have any kind of the modern, you know, facilities and the modern places that you have today, or the modern people that came around and checked you like we do have today. But the family would take turns staying with them. And my Aunt Helen, who was Mama's sister, she and her husband lived right up the road beyond Grandpa's house, and we'd take turns with them staying with Grandma.
Yeah.
And Benny Frank, my older sister, they really sort of adopted Benny Frank because Benny Frank had really married, and really her mother-in-law was really mean to Benny Frank, so Grandma and Grandpa told her to come on back home.
Stay well.
Don't live in that. So she came home, and she lived there, even though she had her baby soon, Wallace. You know, it was her only child she ever had. But Grandma and Grandpa looked after Benny Frank, you know, every way they could, because they loved her.
And I'm gonna ask you about Miss Evie and Uncle Pharaoh, there, and Aunt Helen's sister,
Right.
that I bet you don't know anything about. Aunt Rado.
I don't. They talked much about Rado, the sister that I did not know.
I couldn't find out very much about it.
Rado, did Rado, I can't remember, she died as a baby or?
She was born in 1885 and she died in 1906, 95. So she's like 20 something years old, and she may have had children. I don't know.
I can't.
Austin, we got to get on it.
We got something else to look into.
I can't remember. I remember Mama always spoke of Rado, and it would take me.
She was the older one, I think.
I believe so. Yeah, I can't remember exactly about Rado, but that was, of course, Beauty. Well, that was okay. Aunt.
Uncle Pharaoh.
Uncle Pharaoh was Mama's brother.
Right, and now his name was.
His Pharaoh.
I mean, but did it have any other parts to it besides Pharaoh? I bet they just, they used to, they'd open the Bible and take the finger and point to the first name, and I bet they pointed to the Pharaoh, and that's maybe how you got it.
I can't quite recall to that, but Pharaoh was Mama's brother. Of course, and it was Helen.
Yeah.
And at this day and time, they would call her Helen, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But we called her Helen. Nobody ever called her Helen. It was Helen. Aunt Helen was Mama's sister.
Now, what about Pharaoh's personality? What kind of person was he?
Pharaoh was a cute man. I'll have to say in my older days. Pharaoh could do anything, and one thing that he liked to do, he was always funny, and his statements he made were just real funny statements. But he made baskets. He would take a tree, a certain kind of tree, white oak, and he would take it, and he would cure the wood. He'd cut it in strips, so big, and he would cure those strips. He'd put them in water for so long, then he'd let them dry for so long. But while they were still, real movable, he would take them and weave them into cotton baskets, and cotton baskets were about this high, and so big.
Did he ever make any about that big around and about that top? Okay, I've got one of those, and you answered a question Austin and I were just talking about. I think Grandpa Phillips made them too, but Uncle Pharaoh's the one that made.
Uncle Pharaoh's one. Well, in fact, Uncle Pharaoh made me one when I was a little girl, around that 8 or so. And it was this big, and it was he called it my suitcase.
Huh.
And a lot of times after Joe Louis started boxing and they had a radio, the people down the road had a radio, the Prestons did. And Daddy and Uncle Pharaoh, we lived up the road, Daddy would go down and he and Uncle Pharaoh would walk down to the guy that had the radio and listen to Joe Louis box at night. And a lot of times I'd say I was gonna spend the night with Aunt Muni, who was Uncle Pharaoh's wife. I said, well, I'll just spend the night when Garen and Leala were at home. And I don't think, Vernon was real small.
All right, let's get their children now.
Okay.
And it was Kermit.
Kermit.
And he'd been in World War II. And we've got Verna, a good story, Verna telling about Kermit during the war.
Oh, good.
And then there's Verna, who's the youngest. She and I hit it off real good because, like me and this thing here, me and Austin hit it off because we both are interested in family history enough to look it up. Well, Verna liked me because I was asking her questions about it, and she loved it. All right, and then there's Leala. Now, Leala and
Garen, G-A-Y-R-O-E, Garen.
And Gary, but didn't Benny Frank and Leala and Aunt Marlene, they all worked at the pajama factory, didn't they?
They did in Ozark.
Was it the same pajama factory?
Oh, well,
Or is it just one? Or?
Well, now, Leala and Garen went in the early days into Dothan to work at the hosiery mill.
Oh.
And Benny Frank and them worked at the
Pajama factory?
pajama factory in Ozark.
Yeah.
And
But Leala didn't work at the pajama factory?
Not that I remember,
Okay.
not that I recall them working there. I first recall them going out of the home to work was when they went into Dothan and they lived with Tommy Logan's mama.
Huh.
By then she had moved into Dothan, from out in the country, over from Sylvan Grove, where Tommy her family still sends money to that church today, which was a Methodist church, I believe. But ours was a Baptist of Mount Enon. But that's the story of that.
So Gary, and they had a black Ford, I think, a little black Ford, didn't they, forever?
Right.
And I mean, everybody else had trade cars, and Leala and Gary, they had that black Ford.
They did, and kept it for many, many years.
Many years.
And in fact, I got to tell something about them. When they went to, both of them had beautiful complexions. And when they went to Dothan and they discovered a place that was selling cosmetics called Merle Norman, which is interesting today because that's a booming business. And when I was in the 12th grade, they got me I don't know what grade I was in when they gave me my first. They was interested, and they knew I was interested in makeup at an early age, so they bought me some Merle Norman products. And that's why it was my first introduction to the Merle Norman products.
And have you used any of that makeup since then, or
Well,
you
I've
try to
used
stay
it.
away from it?
I really used it up until recently when I don't have it in my town, so I've been having to use other makeup because I hadn't been able to get out of town to buy me some Merle Norman.
Now, Charlotte, I
Yeah.
know when you were young, you needed a lot of religious guidance.
Yeah.
Did any of them ever help you in Sunday school or anything? Or if you got anything to show us? Or?
Oh, yes. I had Leala, as we called her, but I never called her Leala. I called her Ija. And when I was a little girl, I called her Ija. Well, she was anything at church, usually Ija was my teacher or leader. So, Lowell had found this and kept it for me all these years. And it says this: to Charlotte Yarbrough from Leala Phillips, December the 24th, 1942. December the 24th, 1942. Isn't
So
that
you was
interesting?
8 years old.
Yeah, and it's very interesting. It's called the Lord's Prayer and the Beatitudes. And of course it goes on, like in Our Father, it goes through the whole thing of of the Beatitudes, and at the different parts, hallowed be thy name. And I will, thy kingdom come, thy will be done, showing kids. That's what you call $1 million treasure. You wouldn't take anything from something like that. And to have it, and I was so thankful that he
Did
said
y'all
that.
had little Sunday school classes?
She taught me from the time I was small till, as long as I can remember. Ija was, one of my religious teacher, whatever was going on in church, till I outgrew her age group, and I probably stayed with her till they kicked me out of that class.
Well, she must have done a good job, because I remember when you lived with us, every night, never missed a night, you read that Bible.
Right, I still
And
do.
you still do read that Bible, so
I do.
she's the one that got you started on the right foot.
On the right track. She definitely is.
All right, let's talk about Aunt Helen's children. The only one I really know about is Randolph.
Well, now Aunt Helen's children was now Randolph was the man in the family, and Grace was another one, and Leona.
Oh, that's the one Mama fought with?
Now, yes, now it's an interesting story about Lois, Eddie's mama, and Leona. Leona, I will have to say, what our side of the family is, that Leona was jealous of Lois. And of course that's
And
Lois.
they probably said the other way from their side.
I'm sure they would say the other side. But, family sort of took up and all. But anyway, Lois and Leona, it didn't matter if they had spend the night parties with Garen and Leona, their cousins or whatever. They were gonna find something to fight or argue about.
Now you talk about fight and get down in the floor, right?
I'm talking about where you grab hair and kick each other. And I'm talking about a fight, not a just a little dash and run. But anyway, let me tell you, one night, Leila decided that she was just gonna let them fight, because they had to wait till everybody was asleep, because they knew that Uncle Pharaoh, if they were staying there at our house, they couldn't get in a fight, so they were down at Garen's, down in Uncle Pharaoh's, and his daughters, Garen and Leila. So Leila said, Garen, tonight I'm gonna hold the lamp, or maybe it was like Garen, said, I'm gonna hold the lamp, because they didn't have electricity. Said, after Mom and Daddy's gone to bed, let's just hold the lamp and let them fight. So Leila,
I had never heard that.
never heard that one.
Uh-uh.
Okay, Leila went and got the oil for the lamp or something, and Garen held it, and they let Leona and Lois actually fight till they decided
Well,
they
who won?
could go. Well, now of course, Garen and Leila was for Lois.
Yeah.
Poor old Leona didn't have a backup in this fight, so they all said that Lois won the fight. And anyway, it kept them from arguing and fussing a good while after that.
Well, did they, some of the time were they civiled each other? And
Oh, most of the time.
most of the time, they just every once in a while.
But now what it was too, Leona, I realized, would always try to steal the boyfriends. And I guess that fight was probably over, or maybe not stealing, but like flirting with the boyfriend.
Uh-huh.
Lois didn't want anybody flirting if she ever liked anybody. It was hard to get me and you, it's hard to get Lois to like anybody. I got to tell this about why I know. There were twins called
Leon and Lenny.
Lenny and Leon, and they lived down the road from us, next door to us. And they loved Lois because they always played together. And see, Leona lived up the road. She had her constituency, but they lived up the road. So Lenny and Leon, who were twin Eldridge brothers, they loved Lois, and they would play just like like children would today, like they were brothers and sisters. And they always took Lois's side and everything.
Didn't they kind of egg the fights on
Oh
sometimes?
gosh, yes. And then if anybody liked Lois back in then, I'll have to tell this, they would pass Lenny and Leon's house. And one time this boy really liked Lois that lived in Midland City. And that was about 7 miles from the house. And the poor fellow had borrowed his brother's shoes to come and see Lois that night. He started early in the day, and since the shoes didn't quite fit, they were too big, along the way he'd find like cigarette butts, or he'd find out any kind of paper that people throw inside and fold it and put in his shoes so they could stick on his feet. And by the time he got to Leon and Lenny's, well, he stopped by there, which was a big mistake. And they helped him, I think, find some paper to put in his shoes. But then one of them went through the woods and told Lois that this boy, whatever his name was, this boy was coming to see her and to be ready for him. Well, Lois didn't really like him too much, but she liked him enough she wanted Leon and Lindy not to bother. But one of them went back and got his brother, and one of them stood by the road, and one of them stood on the watch out to see what Lois was going to do when she saw the man with all that paper in his shoes. And so they knew Lois would probably dismiss him, I think, which they did. And then they began to tease Lois by the time he started walking back in the middle of the city about how bad she treated him after he'd walked all that way on those shoes. And of course they were dying, laughing, you know.
They were funny.
Yeah, they thought that was something funny. But
Before we leave this month, so I think we need to stop and thank Cousin Randolph, because he's the one, we're interested in family history. Well, he took it to another level, and that wonderful book about the Mount Enon church and the Mount Enon cemetery that he did. Every time I get to studying family history and the Yarbroughs and Phillips, I always go back to that book. And he has a son that I wish this movie could get to, that lives down in Florida somewhere.
he's a pilot. Lori has seen him recently.
Really?
Yeah,
Well,
he flies into, or did fly into Dothan every once in a
well,
while.
we want to meet him. We want to talk to him, and I hear he's kind of into the family history,
I
so
think so.
we want to hook up with him,
Uh-huh.
and if we get him. But we appreciate and another thing, Mama was in Washington during World War II,
Right.
and Randolph was in the Army, and he went through Washington, and so he came to see Mama.
Oh, did
And
he?
I've got a good picture that I'll stick onto this right now. Of Mama and Randolph in Washington during World War II.
Oh, and I think, I may be wrong, but didn't Randolph get his doctorate in maybe doing something about the cemetery thing, maybe I don't know.
I don't
But you know,
know.
sometimes they get doctorate different, you know, as their thing. I'm not sure of that.
He
But
was
anyway,
smart though, we know that.
It
much.
looked like it was,
And I think he really did a lot. I think he had something to do with that fence that got built around the church. And he really helped. He remembered Mount Eden even though he'd moved to Florida.
oh, he paid for the ironworks that went in to drive to the cemetery, yeah. He loved this cemetery there.
Okay.
By,
All right,
in
we
front of
want to
Austin's
try to
house.
keep this thing around 20 minutes, so
Okay.
we need to jump. And this is going to be harder because I don't think we had as much relationship with Papa's family.
Right.
Okay, Aunt Ada, who died in 1962,
Mm-hmm.
and she was married to Everett Danner,
Mm-hmm.
and they had 6 children.
Right.
Do you know anything about them, where they live, anything about them?
Well, one thing about it, I look like my Aunt Ada more than like Daddy's side of the family. I think more than Mama's side. And I hate that because Betty Sue, who was 6 years older than I, was always so pretty. And then I came along looking like Daddy's people. But anyway, that's beside the point. In fact, I look very much like Aunt Ada did. In other words, when she got older, and
Where'd she live?
she lived in Louisville, Alabama. They lived in Louisville.
And what about her kid?
Well, when we were small, I remember going up there one Christmas. We spent Christmas with them. Christmas, yeah. The only thing I really remember about that Christmas, though, was I know the little boys would aggravate me and like try to steal my lunch or something to aggravate me. And so back then they had those little artificial snakes, you could take them and move them. They looked like they were real snakes, you know. And somebody had given me one, and so what I did, I took it and put it in my bag that I knew they were, when I got up at Aunt Ada's, I knew they were gonna try to get that bag, cause anything I had, they like to aggravate me by getting it. So I remember taking that snake and putting it in that bag.
So.
And the word got around, so they left my bag alone that Christmas.
They did?
My cousins did.
Up at Louisville?
Up at Louisville.
Okay, do you remember, you don't remember, was it boys or girls or?
Well, it was both. The man of the house was real fun, real funny, real.
That's Everett Danner?
Yeah.
Aunt Ada's husband?
Yeah. The best I remember about him, he was a real handsome, dark complected man with, you know, pretty black hair. And was really really, everybody, you know, men and women just thought it looked mighty good, you know, it was fine looking.
Well, maybe we'll find a picture of him. All right, now the next is Hub, which is, I guess, Hubert, or I've got it down somewhere, but Uncle Hub, he died in 1937, so there's no way you can remember him.
I just remember a lot of them talking about him.
Right. He was married, what I thought was interesting, he was married to Falk, F-A-U-L-K.
Yeah.
And he had some children by her. Well, she died, if I've got it right, so he married her sister and had some children by her. So he was married to two Falks.
Yeah.
And they had 8 children between the whole bunch. Do you know of any of?
No, but I just know back then that was what most men really did in families, you know, especially living out in the country. That if one died, it was nothing unusual for them to die. You know, the
To
next
marry
time,
the sister.
or whoever, you know, right? It wasn't related.
So that means, Ruth, I guess if something happened to you, I got to marry Vira Jean, or?
No.
No? Okay. All right, then it's Os. All right.
I don't remember too much.
Ariosta, when he died in 1941, so you wouldn't.
I don't know. I
You
just
wouldn't know.
remember the name and yeah.
He had 7 children. And then there's Aunt Fanny that was married to Cephas Lewis.
Yeah, the
Aunt
Lewis.
Fanny died in 54. Now, where's Alb come in?
Oh, Yarbrough. Now, the Lewises lived in Geneva.
Yeah. Oh, that's Irel.
Uh-huh.
And that was Mama. We'd go
Good
by to
friend.
see Irel a lot.
Well, Irel, you don't tell me about Irel, right?
Yeah.
Okay, Irel was about Lewis's age. And so I never shall forget this though. I was little, but when the war was over, and they happened to live near us at the time, but Irel and them was up at the house when they, and I believe Lois was, for some reason, this happened when the war was over, but anyway, I remember, maybe just Irel's people was at our house at the time, but anyway, when they announced that the war was over, of course the women were in the house, and they, heard it, and started, beating the hands and everything, and they laughed at their father, because he'd always say the craziest thing, and so they started beating on the head and went and hitting the daddy on the head. The war's over, my brother's coming home. And he said, quit you little fools, see they were aggravated, quit you little fools, you don't even have no brother. He was saying that, men would just say, of course that was their brother, and he knew it and they did, but it's aggravated with them for hitting him. And they did, one of them had pots and pans and they were hitting them with spoons and everything.
I know
They were so
glad
happy
for
the war
that to
was
be
over.
over. Yeah, all that rationing that had to be, couldn't buy gas, couldn't buy tires, all that kind of stuff. Now, one of them had a restaurant or something over there in Geneva, didn't they? Doc.
They did Doc's restaurant.
Now, was he married to one of?
One of the daughters, I believe.
We stopped over there several times, and I met Irel, and it was more than one of them over
Oh
there.
yeah, well, it was sisters.
Yeah. But see, that's another whole bunch that we need to
Our cousins.
find their children and children.
Right. Uh-huh.
And you may be able to do some of it with that DNA, when somebody
In
Oh,
fact,
yeah.
Jean Baldwin, being one of Uncle Har's grandchildren, was the one that's closest my age, just died recently, not many years ago. His name was Jean Baldwin.
Yeah.
And, I don't, and Leona, the one that used to fight with Lois,
Uh-huh.
they were, that was his aunt. Yeah, so we do have many cousins, you know,
All right, we winding up now. When you were a little girl, Charlotte,
yeah.
and everybody knew this but me, that Henry Yarbrough weighed about 95 pounds,
Right.
plowed a big old 2,000-pound ox. Do you remember anything about an ox?
I do.
Well, what that ox look like?
It was just a big, huge animal.
Was he like yellow or red?
No,
Or?
he was sort of looked like a hog, sort of, in my opinion, you know.
Big old
About the
round.
colors of him. Except he was huge.
And Papa would get behind him and he'll
Almost
weigh 95 pounds.
Almost like a horse, in other words, except larger. Yeah.
I
And
just
he,
can't picture.
with a little plow, it did look funny, come to think of it. And, but yeah. But let me tell about the peanut poles. Back in those days, when I said that, I'm interested down we're still interested in peanuts because peanuts is becoming so popular again, even in Atmore. But back then, of course, when you planted the peanuts, it was time to plow them up. You plowed them up, and when the foliage on it began to turn brown, you would stack them on a pole. They would put poles in the middle of the fields, and you would stack those peanuts till they dried completely out on those poles. And then you would send, after they completely dried, then you would send in a peanut picker. When they, when I came on, those peanut pickers, that you'd come along and put those peanuts in the peanut picker, and it would pick the peanuts off.
Huh.
And so that became,
Who had one of those?
well, I can't remember who had the first one. I think maybe it came in from Midland City or somewhere, because somebody in the community got one. But what was interesting, we were happy that time of year, because first of all, when the peanuts were first plowed up, we would have peanut boilings while the peanuts were still green on the vine. And Daddy would always get enough peanuts. We'd pick them off hand by hand. We'd pick off those green peanuts, had a wash pot outside, and then you would put all those peanuts in there and put salt, build your fire under it, and then the young people would have what you call a peanut boiling. And you'd come, and the young neighbor, the children of the community would come in, and you would eat, you'd have peanut boiling and sit around and eat peanuts and Coca-Cola if you were fortunate enough to buy your RC from Rex Preston's store down the street. But then when they dried, now this was interesting, when they dried, this was back when Betty Sue was a young girl and in high school, they would have what you call a peanut candy pudding. And we had a big table out in our kitchen, a big table in the middle of the room. And Betty Sue, who was my older sister at home, would go and they would boil the syrup till it got a certain temperature. You could tell by looking at it, and got cooler enough you could pour it on the table, and you would pour that syrup out. They'd put those peanuts you had parched in the oven in that, and then the young people would pull it, and that's what you call going to candy pudding. And they were very popular around
It's like
that part
peanut
of the
brittle.
country. Huh?
Peanut brittle.
It's like what you're making peanut brittle today when you waited till it cooled off. But that was one of their activities for the young people, was going to the candy pulling. So-and-so's having a candy pulling tonight.
And they do it every year when the peanuts got dry.
That was when the peanuts had dried on I got the carton for the horse telling about the peanuts, yeah. When the peanuts got dry on the poles, and they were ready to pick off, and then they were ready to be sold too. You put them in the big bags, after the peanut picker would pick them, they'd put them in the bags and sell them to Dothan,
First time I ever ate a boiled peanut, Cindy went out in the field right by your house, pulled some peanuts, and
Right.
went to the well, we got some water, rinsed them off. He had a little syrup bucket,
Right.
and he put a couple of handfuls and some water in that syrup bucket, went in the house and got some salt, built a fire, and boiled those peanuts. That's the first boiled peanut I ever had, and I've loved them ever since.
That's
Like
right.
old Sim.
Yeah, I know, put on the parchments before we did the green ones. That's what we did when they were on the vine.
Yeah.
Green, you'd go pull them up, you'd have to pull up the peanuts before they plowed them up, or if you waited till they plowed them up. And you'd get the peanuts, pick the peanuts off that, and you picked them off by hand, And
Did
that
y'all
was-
have a radio when you were little?
We did have a radio, the first one I remember. And I remember, yeah, we did. Now, I remember though hearing like the Blackwood Brothers and I remember there was a song, Elsie, Jack, and Jim. And the other day when we did TV, I was trying to remember that. Elsie, Jack, and Jim, Jesus saved us from our sin. Now we are happy all the day. And
Well, that's like a singing song that they have.
they'd have on the radio when they started their their radio show in the mornings,
Now your daddy used to be bad about wanting to go to singing
Oh.
way down in Florida.
Yeah, our friends, the Eldridges that we talked about earlier, that close friends of ours, and Daddy loved gospel singing, gospel singing. And so Sally Jane, one of the Eldridge girls, left to go. And by then she had gotten a car. And so she would pick up Daddy on Saturday night, and they would go around anywhere it was near where they could go and get back home,
There was one down in Florida, and it was all night singing.
They went one night. Mama was like me, she'd rather stay at home and keep me. But,
Pop would tell it, and the way he told me, I pictured it down around Miami or somewhere. He said you have to ride all the way down, then you stay all night, and you stay still singing when the sun comes up, and then they go home. But it's right down, I can't think of the name of it, but it's just,
Oh, it's Grace,
yeah,
Chipley.
it's one of those towns.
It was Chipley or Graceful, which
Yeah.
was right down outside of Dothan.
Yeah.
But see, that was a long way. And she was so sweet, Sally Jane. Why, she was like Lois, like our sister. And she would take Daddy, and they would stay up all night singing. And sure enough, people did that. Once they'd have those people to come in, like the Blackwood Brothers or any of those old gospel singers, oh, they're coming to town. And they would
It
go
was a
and
big deal. But
stay the sun came up.
now, did you have electric lights all your life?
No, when I was real small, I remember we had kerosene lights and Aladdin. I did come on when they got Aladdin lamps. Now Aladdin lamps, where they had a different filter in them, and they gave brighter lights than just our kerosene lights. In other words, they stepped up a class in modern technology.
I've got that Aladdin lamp.
Have you really?
Sue,
Great.
I tell about it on another one of these little things, but Sue one time, she said, I've got our Aladdin lamp, and I want you to have it, because Mama she loved that Aladdin lamp, and bragged about how good the light, that's what they did their homework by.
The Aladdin, yeah.
And so I've got it sitting right on the table that you ate at when you were a kid.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah. So when you were little, you didn't have it. So it was like maybe in the 40s, you reckon y'all got?
I'm sure it was, yeah.
And I remember it was that one bulb hanging from way up there, one bulb hanging down,
And it was so bright.
about a 200 watt, probably. But that was all the light. It wasn't any lights around here. Is that light hanging there?
And they told you when you first, like I said, I came along with the Aladdin, we had more than just a kerosene lamp. But one light, I remember that when we got electricity, and then you were told, make sure you turn off, but you turn off the lights, you try to turn them.
Save that electricity.
We were like it, I guess we sort of had the feeling that you might use up the power, the night come off or something. But
Well, there's one thing though, Charlotte, I know for a fact. But you didn't have a bathroom in the house when you was growing up, because they didn't have one when I started going over there.
Oh, that's the truth. Oh, no, but I never shall forget this story. I know you want me to tell the story what happened to me. One day, also, they had by then transportation to take the people that worked at the pajama mill in Ozark. They had a line that came through there, the Selma line, I forgot the name of it, but they came through there picking up people, that wanted to go to work so they didn't have to take their own cars. So one day I was outside in the yard, playing out in the front yard. And so my brother Earl happened to be out at our outdoor toilet. Now for your outdoor toilet, in the early days, what you used for bathroom tissue, because remember tissue wasn't all that, popular back then because people just didn't use it.
Waste money on something like that.
Like that. And you used a Sears and Roebuck catalog. Now that was your toilet paper, to tell the truth, people might as well tell the truth about it. But anyway, my brother Earl was out in our outdoor toilet way behind the house. I was sitting out by the road, and here came the man selling Watkins. By then a person would come by, a man would start selling his product, Watkins line, which made flavoring. Everybody had to have flavoring and things like that for the household, used in the kitchen. So the man came by and said, "Little girl, do you think your mama wants anything in the Watkins line?" Well, I thought that was the name of the line that was the new bus line. Everybody's talking about the new line. I thought that was the bus line that was coming to pick up those people to go to work. And he said, "Little girl, you think your mama wants anything in the Watkins line?" And I said, "Yeah, my sister rides the Watkins line to work every day." And he said, "Little girl, will you ask your mama if she wants anything in the Watkins line?" I said, "Yeah, I told you, Betty Frank, that's her name. She lives with us, but she goes to work every day." About that time, Earl, who was out in our outdoor toilet, had heard this conversation. So he yells to the back door, "Betty Sue, go get that little fool out of the yard and tell the man we don't want anything." So that was one interesting little story about
the outhouse.
Well, two things though happening. They did get a transportation to go to work, and the people did still come by selling products like the Watkins flavor, and I believe still one of the flavors that people sell today.
No, Watkins.
Well, anyway,
When
we
did y'all
didn't get
get a
any
bathroom?
that day.
Did Earl, is he the one that kind of put in a bathroom?
Well, yeah, and when Earl came home from the Navy, I think we got in the bathroom.
Well, I know it was after I was around, because I remember going out to that outhouse and then going out behind the barn with Papa. and so, but I remember it was real exciting when we got that bathroom in there.
Oh, well, yeah, oh, yes.
And you grew up there, y'all had a fireplace to heat by.
We did.
I remember that, so I know you did. So for the first long part of your life, you'd get up in that house, and that house could get cold, and you'd hit it for that big fireplace that Miss Evie or Henry wanted, got a fire going already.
Right. When I had pneumonia when I was about 5 years old, and we had a bed in what we call the part of what later became our big kitchen. We had a bed in where the fireplace was. In other words, had a bed. And I remember when I was really small, a little bit of that when I had pneumonia, and the doctor would come out to the house, and I remember almost dying. And they'd keep a fire going, night and day, because the doctor said we had to have that. And that's when they had penicillin, but they did not have it, as far down as we had it. It'd been invented, of course, and they had it in the big towns. But our little doctor, Dr. Cody in the city, didn't have any penicillin. So I almost died with the pneumonia, and they had to cut under my right shoulder blade and put a tube to drain my lungs. The doctor said that's the last resort, or you're gonna lose your baby girl. So anyway, they cut under my shoulder blade and put in a tube for it to drain, my lungs to drain. And so they'd finally given up on me, I think almost. But then one day they went in and Mama just sort of moved that tube. And when it did naturally, it shot out. And that was infection coming out then.
Wow.
And so that was my
That might
experience.
have saved you. Did you have rheumatic fever or something like that too? or-
No, I just had pneumonia was
Just
one of the main
pneumonia,
things.
okay.
And that's why, under my shoulder blade today, that adhesion. But later on in life, you couldn't do anything about the adhesions because that adhesion already grown to my backbone part, you see.
Yeah.
And they couldn't do anything about it. It was too dangerous. So that's why my shoulder blade sticks out today. Yeah, I hadn't thought of all these things in a long time.
Well, we need to end up, but I got one more about your mama, who's one of the very sweetest people I ever knew.
Yeah,
Easy and slow and wouldn't hurt anything except some chickens might have a different idea. I know I've seen her go walking out to the chicken yard and the chickens come up like that. But she's like Darth Vader. I mean, she'd be throwing that corn and all of a sudden that hand go up. She'd have a chicken, but she could take that chicken, take him over to a block, cut that head off, have him plucked, and siege him over a fire and be cooking fried chicken for breakfast, couldn't she? I mean, she'd done that.
but she could wring one's neck real
Too.
good. She was real strong with that arm.
Yeah, but
That's
I remember,
what you-
but the one time I saw her do it was she used the axe, and,
Yeah.
but Aunt Merlene, I went to her house and she was wringing that.
Yeah,
And they're both real sweet people, but when it came down to chickens, they could be pretty harsh. But what the story I want to hear you tell is I was a little boy, and you and I think Annette were in that back bedroom that I think of it Benny Frank's bedroom. You know,
right.
the
My
back one.
Frank moved in with us,
And Miss Evie said, Charlotte, y'all get up. And Charlotte and Annette, they ain't moved. And then a little bit later, Charlotte, y'all get up now. And a little bit later, I heard the back door close. And then in a few minutes, she comes back in and she got a big old long peach limb. And Charlotte and Annette are under the cover and wah, wah, wah. She is frailing down. Mama, quit, Mama, we getting up. Now, did that happen or I just imagined?
No. And Mama was still just as soft spoken as Ruth is today. She walked on out like she hadn't done anything. I told you girls to get up.
Yeah.
Went right on with that. Like she hadn't done anything. I told you girls to get up.
Well, I had a whole different opinion. Miss Evie tell me to do something after that. Buddy, I jumped. Do it. So,
When she told me to get up, I did too. Then
oh, yeah.
yeah.
All right, well, I think we've covered enough, and hopefully we ain't gone over 20 minutes. But Charlotte, this is part one. We may want to do a part two.
Oh my gosh.
Okay.
Y'all can stand part.